What do the people of Bologna say about putting spaghetti in your bolognese? The people of Bologna naysay putting spaghetti in your bolognese. What? In 1982, an official recipe was listed in Accademia Italiana della Cucina with the support of the Bologna Chamber of Commerce. This list of ingredients are as follows: 10 ounces of beef cartella or thin skirt steak, ground or finely diced, 6 ounces of pancetta, also finely diced, 50 grams of carrots, 50 grams of celery, and 50 grams of onions, all finely chopped, half a cup of white or red wine, here we're going to be using white, 20 grams of triple tomato extract or 5 spoons of tomato sauce, half a cup of beef broth, 1 cup of whole milk, salt and pepper to taste, and it also calls for panna di cottura, or warm milk, which to make your own, you'll need a liter of whole milk, about 4.2 cups, and 7 grams of butter. If you're like me, you probably grew up seeing bolognese as a rich tomato-heavy sauce, and yet this ingredients list barely has any tomatoes, and quite a bit of dairy. But this makes sense. Bologna sits in Emilia Romagna, a place that has a very short tomato season. So the dishes aren't going to have a lot of tomatoes in them and are going to have more of what they have available, which is dairy. So where in the world do we get this idea for bolognese being so tomato heavy? Well, I'm going to blame that on the war, but we'll talk about that later. Heat a Dutch oven over medium to medium-low heat. Add a tablespoon of water and then your pancetta. The water will help prevent the pancetta from burning as the fat renders. Cook the pancetta for about 5 to 10 minutes until the meat has slightly browned and the fat is all rendered out. Once the fat has been rendered out, add your onions, carrots, and celery. Toss to mix well. You'll want to cook this for about 5 to 10 minutes until the onions are softened and translucent, but not browned. Some of you might have heard of the term Mirepoix, which is the French culinary word for the holy trinity of aromatics: celery, carrots, and onions. The Italians have a similar term for this, the Battuto, which means beaten down or broken into pieces, which is exactly what our raw vegetables are. But once you cook them, you get a Soffritto, which is so named after soffriggere, or to saute. Once your soffritto is ready, crank the heat to medium-high and add the ground or diced beef. Stir it well. Allow to cook for 15 minutes, stirring occasionally and scraping the fond off of the bottom of the pot so that it doesn't burn. Now add the wine and allow to cook for 2 to 3 minutes, stirring occasionally. This is a perfect chance to deglaze our pan and scrape up the fond from the bottom of the pot with our wine. I've heard this dish called ragu before, and though that is correct, it is not accurate, in the same way as somebody saying, that's not French onion, that's soup. See, ragu gets its name from a similar sounding French word which means stewed meat, and was likely as a term introduced when Napoleon came back to Italy to thank Italy for all of the French cooking techniques that they got from Catherine de' Medici. You will find in some parts of Italy that a ragu is just a hearty bowl of meat and liquid, but more often than not, a ragu has 4 key ingredients: your aromatics, pasta, meat, and liquid. But what those 4 ingredients are can vary from region to region. Interestingly though, as much as we associate pasta with ragus, the first recorded version of a ragu, or at least a meat sauce, having pasta in it wasn't until the 1800s. While the wine is cooking, we're going to combine our beef broth and tomato paste and mix until it is all incorporated. It'll look weird. But then add the mixture to the pot, stirring well. Let everything come up to a soft boil and then immediately drop the heat to low. We'll be simmering this for 2 hours, but you're not going anywhere. We're going to be gradually adding in our 1 cup of milk. Every 15 minutes or so, add about 2 tablespoons of the milk into the sauce and stir. By the end of the 2 hours, you should have used up the whole cup of milk. As you get closer to the end of the 2 hours, go ahead and taste intermittently, adding salt and pepper as needed. You don't want to add it too soon because the risk of over-salting gets worse the sooner you do it. So how in the world did we go from the dish we're making right now to the dish everyone outside of Italy seems to think bolognese is? Well, the answer is probably World War II. You see, after the British and American soldiers were introduced to the culinary food of Italy, they were sent back home with little knowledge of what they were actually eating. And since at this point, Italy had only been unified for 100 years, who knows what terms they were using for each other's dish, because they probably only cared about their regional dishes. So a ragu down in Naples would have been completely different than a ragu up in Venice. The America equivalent would be if I sent one person to Texas and one person to Carolina and asked them to come back after having tried barbecue sauce and to recreate it. They would absolutely disagree with each other because both regions have their own version of a similarly named dish. So likelihood is that the people who came to the United States, either as Italian immigrants or World War II veterans, had a concept that they melded into the American culinary that was drastically different than the actual regional dish, Bolognese. And this is why in 2019, when the mayor of Bologna went to London and tried their Bolognese sauce, he called it fake news. As the sauce simmers, prepare the panna di cottura. Add your butter and a liter of milk to a small saucepan over low heat. You're gonna let this simmer for the whole 2 hours so that it reduces to half its volume. Be certain to stir occasionally and don't rush this process because you don't want to burn your milk. Now, the actual recipe for making panna di cottura is to use whole milk. The thing is that European whole milk tends to be 3.5 to 4% fat, but American whole milk is only 3.2%, 3.3 max. So to get that added fat in there, we're adding a little bit of butter, which gives us that nice creaminess that we would get if we were in Europe. Once the 2 hours is up, slowly mix some of your panna di cottura into your sauce. The site isn't clear on how much you're supposed to add in, and I think I may have added too much. I'm not sure. Some people say a couple of tablespoons, maybe the whole thing. I went with like a cup, maybe some more. It looks okay. And there you have it. Your Ragu Alla Bolognese is done. And you can actually just eat this on its own. But if you are going to make it into a pasta, then you're gonna wanna use tagliatelle, the official pasta intended to be used for this dish. So what we're gonna do here is we're going to take some of the bolognese and add it to a pan over low heat. Now, it doesn't specify, so I'm going to use 6 ounces of sauce with 3 ounces of dry pasta. But you could use more or less. It's your world. We're gonna go ahead and cook up our tagliatelle. It's only gonna take about 3 to 4 minutes to become al dente. So after 3 minutes, we're gonna add the pasta and some of the pasta water, about 1/4 cup, to our pan with our bolognese sauce. Fully mix and incorporate for the next minute, turn off your heat, and serve hot. I mean, it's not what I grew up with, by any means. This doesn't look anything like a bolognese I'm used to. And honestly, I couldn't even find any pictures of a bolognese because every time I looked it up, I would only find American websites talking about the American dish. And I found a few in Italian, but the pictures were blurry or difficult to see, and I just doubted myself the whole time. I mean, is this what it's supposed to look like? I followed all the ingredients, maybe a little happy with the cream at the end, but it looks good, just different. Let's give it a try. Okay, wow. So this has a very meaty, rich umami flavor, but the rendered down milk adds such a level of creaminess and sweetness. It is a surprising dish, nothing like I'm used to, but still amazing. Tagliatelle is where it's at, that thicker, wider noodle that's going to be able to contain your meat and vegetables. I am surprised. I guess milk steak is a thing. This was an interesting experience and a fun experiment to use the classic recipe and sort of guess my way through some of the techniques. But what would you do in your ragu? What ingredients do you like to have in your sauce? Go ahead and comment down below. And of course, if you like this video, please click the like button, ring the bell, subscribe so you can see future videos. It really helps a small channel like us. As always, study at the dinner table. We'll catch you next time.